Welcome to No Way But North, where we talk about the miracles of recovery and the tools used to achieve them. My name is Cooper Lyons. My clean date is November 27th. And would you imagine that? Not as always. Big John Meldrum is not here with me. He's feeling under the weather. Make sure you help me give him a lot of crap for that in the comments below. Speaking of comments, make sure you leave a like, a subscribe, all of those things. They help us reach so many people and help more people. And if you guys get any value out of this, please just tell one person. We really appreciate all that help. Guys, our guest today is Sean Mills. By the way, what's your clean date?
7/28/14.
Which is,
yesterday.
as of recording this, tomorrow. No, yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations.
Yep.
That's
yesterday,
5 years.
5 years clean.
That's so awesome. And you're going to your home group today to get your chip.
Right after this to get my chip. Yeah.
That's so you're going to be telling your story twice.
Yep.
And you're looking forward to it.
I'll get the long version out of the way, so that way when I go to
Perfect.
the group, I'll just be like, I just didn't use.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's all people need to hear, right?
It's basically the science of
pretty
it.
much
Yeah.
Cool. Guys, Sean is an admissions coordinator for Northpoint Recovery, an Ashwood alumni, mother of two. Mm-hmm. Two awesome kids, and even a kick-ass rock climber. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time. I know you just got off work, and being here can be a little exhausting after work, so we appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, yeah.
Guys, today's quote, and this is actually one of my favorite ones that we've had so far, so props to you, because you came up with this one. I tell them I am not at peace in spite of what I suffered, but because of it. Nando Parrado. I'm saying that right?
Yeah, Nando.
So where did you hear that quote? What does it mean to you?
So Nando Parrado is one of the gentlemen who was on the Uruguayan plane that flew over the Andes in the 80s that crashed.
Yeah.
And they were
Rugby
up there
team,
for
right?
60 days. Yeah, it was either rugby or soccer, football, something like that. And I watched the movie Alive on Netflix a while back, and I really didn't want to watch it, but then I watched it and I was absolutely fascinated by it. And I was fascinated by their story and the hardships that they endured. You know, obviously I don't condone cannibalism, but it stuck with me.
Yeah,
and
it's
so
kind of hard not to.
Yeah. So I loved reading about Nando and everything that he's been through. So when I was looking for quotes, I was like, I know who I'm going to Google.
Yeah.
I know who has some good quotes. Nando.
Yeah, well, and that's really indicative of recovery, right? People talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
Don't shut your door on the past, but remember it, all those kinds of things.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what made me think of was that, because of what I've been through, I'm going to be able to help more people.
Right. The other day I was having dinner with my family, and my dad was saying, it's a shame that you went through all that you did. Kind of like, I'm sad that you had to go through all of that. And it's like, I'm not sad. That shaped me into who I am today.
And I like who I am today.
And I like who I am today. I wouldn't be who I am today without going through all that stuff that I went through. And so I felt that quote really did a good job of summing up that sentiment.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's very concise, and it's really eloquently put. That's what I liked about it, is that there's so much to it.
Yeah.
It's such a short quote.
It's so simple.
Yep. All right. Well, again, thanks for being here. You know kind of what we do here, so I'm just going to jump into it.
Yep.
As you were growing up, what was your childhood like? What was your relationship with your parents, with other kids, things like that?
So when I used to tell my story, when I first came into early recovery, I would start it out with, I was born bad. And the longer that I've been clean, I've really started to pick that apart. And it was just that I was born not being comfortable in my own skin, not feeling that I was ever right, not feeling that I ever fit in anywhere. And so the easiest way for me to sum it up as an early person in recovery was just that I was bad. I was born and I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to control my emotions. I was a very anxious, very fearful child. And
for as long as you can remember.
For as long as I can remember, yeah. And it manifested itself in different ways. But so I was definitely an addict. Yeah. I was born an addict. Yep. And I believe that most addicts are born that way. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing either. Yeah. But I had what I thought was a really good childhood. Like, it really was. Like, my parents stayed together. Everything was really stable. I had everything that I wanted. You know, like, my parents weren't wealthy, but they definitely weren't hurting either. So I grew up with my one little sister. I had older brothers and sisters that had moved out by the time I was born. I was born in Maryland. I was born on the East Coast. And I lived there for the first 6 years of my life, and then we moved to Idaho.
Okay.
So, I mean...
that was similar for me. Idaho's home.
Yeah,
That's where
exactly.
you grew up. Yeah.
Couldn't tell you anything about Maryland, but... So, yeah, I really grew up in a safe place. Back then, Idaho was super safe. I mean, it still is to a degree, so I grew up in this kind of idyllic society right here in Meridian, of all places, Meridian, Idaho.
Yeah, Meridian back then was even safer than
Boise. Yes, it was super small. You know, I lived in this like brand new neighborhood. But even like as a small child, I remember being in elementary school in Idaho, so it was after I was 6, and being in a group with my friends and thinking to myself that if I walked away from them, nobody would notice and nobody would care. And so I did. I walked away from them, and nobody noticed, nobody turned to say, hey, come back. I just left. And in my mind...
That's a huge thought. How old were you?
I was probably like 7 or 8.
That's a giant thought.
I had a lot of crazy thoughts when I was 7 or 8. But that, like, I remember that. I remember where I was at on the playground in elementary school. I remember what the weather was like. It's so burned into my mind. And it's like, from an outside perspective, they probably would have been like, that's just the weird child.
Yeah.
And I mean, essentially that's what I was. I was the weird child.
Good point.
It that really solidified the idea that I was alone and that people didn't like me and that I was unlikable, and it fed into the whole ideal of that I was just bad. And not necessarily like acting out bad, but just something deep down inside of me, like in my core, was wrong.
You were wrong as a person.
I was wrong as a person. I wasn't meant to be as a person. I was a mistake.
Or something missing.
I didn't figure that out until later on. And so it was... Childhood was rough. I was really shy. I was really afraid of like anything remotely that kids like to do, like riding a bike. So I didn't learn how to like ride a bike until I was 16 and drunk because all my inhibitions were gone at that point. And I was like, oh, I can ride a bike now. But I would, you know, in 3rd grade or 4th grade, whatever grade, we would go on these trips on the Greenbelt where you could choose to bike or you could choose to rollerblade, and we'd all go on the Greenbelt, and these were like the worst things in the world for me.
Yeah, I bet.
Because we'd go with a parent, and so it would always be my dad, and we'd start off in one group on the Greenbelt, and then slowly the group would move off into the distance, and it would just be me and my dad being really frustrated at me because I couldn't ride a bike. I couldn't rollerblade. I didn't want to. It didn't bring me any joy. It scared the shit out of me. I didn't like it.
Yeah, that's rough. As a child, I can imagine that being almost traumatic.
Exactly. It was polarizing for me just because there go all of my schoolmates. It was polarizing because my dad was so pissed off at me. And it was polarizing just because, like, I couldn't do this normal thing that kids are supposed to be able to do. Yeah. And I sensed that it caused people grief. It caused people to be angry at me.
So it made you feel even more different and alone and isolated.
Exactly. And weak and small and just, So that fearful mindset kind of carried on into middle school and into high school. But in middle school, I started really kind of to delve into this, what I thought was the scary stuff.
The scary stuff.
Yeah, like the darker side of life.
Oh, okay. The people you're not supposed to talk to.
Right, that sort of thing. But I was still definitely very much afraid. But one thing that brought me a lot of solace was music, and I was really drawn into the metal scene, the heavy metal scene, listening to that type of music. And it came, when I was 11, all of those people were still scary. And I started to like dress in all black, and I dyed my hair black, and I had the black eyeliner. I think I showed you a picture of myself in high school.
I think I have seen that.
It was pretty dramatic, my transformation. But honestly,
we might have to see if we can get that picture and just put it up on
I'll
the
see if
screen
I
right
can get
here.
the picture and put it up on the screen. But much to the dismay of my very, very Catholic mother, my mother was always really, really anxious and really worried about us too. And I honestly think, like, as an adult looking back, it has to do with the fact that, like, when I was really little, one of my friends in the neighborhood got hit and killed by a car. So that anxiety was just always there. She was always really, really just overburdened with taking care of us and just wanted to make sure we were safe and always wanted to know what we were doing. But she was also very, very Catholic. And so me at 11, I was anti-Catholic as all hell.
Yep.
And me and my mom just butted heads, and we butted heads. And I realize now how much of an effect that had on me, because it was hard to really swallow the fact that, like, my mom told me I was going to burn in hell for all eternity.
Yeah.
And it drove me to isolate from her even more. Like, when I was...
Did you have a close relationship with her prior to that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, she was my mom, and when you're a kid, like, that's your safe person to go to. Totally. My dad was a little more distant. He was there, but he was a little more distant. So that really just severed that relationship with my mom. And I mean,
that's a pretty young time for that to happen also.
Yeah. So in middle school, I didn't know how to act. Like, in elementary school, I didn't know how to act, but in middle school, I didn't know how to act, but I was acting out. Okay. And so I was doing crazy things, like going around the middle school asking people for meth. I didn't do meth. Like, I wasn't smoking meth. I was just trying to, like, make a scene. And I got in trouble, and, you know, people would, like, report me to the guidance counselor, and I'd go in and I'd just, like, you know, put my tail between my legs and be like, I'm sorry, I don't know what I was talking about. Like, I never had, like, the balls to go through with, like, my shit that I was projecting.
Yeah.
It was like, I wanted to make a scene, but the moment the confrontation happened, I would back into my shell again. Yep. And so that's kind of how it was all through middle school. I had a really good habit of, like, getting friends and then, like, just completely ruining the friendships. So I never had, like, a consistent group of friends.
So would it be like a conflict, or, like, would it fizzle out?
Sometimes it would just fizzle out. Other times it would be drama.
Okay.
Other times it would definitely be drama. Or me talking shit, or me deciding that I don't want to hang out with you anymore because I'm too cool for you, or something. Like, obviously I wasn't a cool kid. Just, like, me being a little shit. In middle school was the first time I ever drank. Like, obviously at that point in time, the reason I went around and I was talking about meth or asking people for meth is that my insides didn't match my outsides. Like, I was in inner turmoil, and I had, you know, when you looked at home, like, my home life was great. I had no causation for that. Like, I saw the kids who felt the same way as I did, and they'd go home and their parents were, like, beating them and shit like that, and I didn't have that. I didn't have a reason for that. It made me feel like a fraud, essentially. Guilty, guilty on top of everything else that I was, like, experiencing at that point. Where was I going with that?
First time you drank.
First time that I drank. That was so tangential right there. So the first time I drank, I was 13. And, like, I could not wait. My parents didn't drink. Like, my parents were super straight-laced. They didn't smoke cigarettes. So the first opportunity I had to, like, consume something, oh my God, I was over the moon. And I remember...
So before you even consumed anything, you were, like, riding that high almost.
That's what I wanted to do. Like...
So where did you get that idea from? Did you know people that drank or used?
Yeah, I did. Okay. I did know people who drank or used, but also probably just, like, the media and movies, you know. My favorite band when I was 11 was Nirvana, and Kurt Cobain was a junkie who killed himself, and that was somebody that I idolized at that point. And so it took me looking back to really, like, see all the puzzle pieces fitting together, because back then I had no clue. But with the turmoil that I was in and the people that I looked up to, like, it was like recipe for addict right there. But yeah, I drank with my friends. Her parents had some liquor of some sort, and she was just like, this, I'm pretty sure I like peer pressured her into like getting this bottle because she really didn't want to like, make her parents angry or anything like that. But I was like, we gotta drink this, and we did, and it was just such a happy feeling for me.
Yeah.
Because all the worry went away, all the stress went away, all the anxiety, worrying about what people thought, it all disappeared.
Alcohol was good at what alcohol did.
Alcohol was good.
So did you drink alcoholically your first time? Because that's been a theme for our show, is that every time we talk about somebody's story, they like, first time they drank to blackout, puke. Something happened that was very indicative of the rest of their story was to follow.
So not that time, no.
Okay.
That time was only a very small amount, and it's because that she didn't want a noticeable amount of alcohol to disappear from her parents'
So it wasn't
liquor.
up to you.
It wasn't up to me, but I did get a little bit of alcohol, and I knew, like, that's what I wanted.
Yep.
That's what I needed. And after that, just, like, switching around with friend groups, there was a point in time where me and my friend would, like, literally drink children's ibuprofen, like a whole bottle of children's ibuprofen, because it would get us like that tingly feeling.
Anything to feel not
like just the death of your liver cells, but anything.
That's the tingly feeling.
Yeah, that's the tingly, just stupid stuff.
Yep.
So, but the second time that I got really, really drunk, I had skipped school. It was probably my freshman year of high school. And I got blackout drunk, wasted, like you were saying. Like, I'm made a fool of myself.
Yep.
Everybody else was like chill in drinking, and I was gone. And I thought it was hilarious.
And you had the time of your life.
I had the time of my life. Yep. I came home and I started puking violently in the bathroom, and my mom's like, hey, what's going on? And I think I told her that I drank like 5 energy drinks, and I like was sick.
Smart.
And,
That's pretty smart, even for a blacked out teen.
Yeah. Like I because I was so against confrontation, I became a really, really good liar.
Yeah, that makes sense.
A really, really good manipulator. But the non-confrontational behavior really kind of like guided me through high school, because I would skip school to go get fucked up, or I'd sneak out at night to go get fucked up. Anywhere like where I wouldn't get caught, where my parents wouldn't find me, like I didn't have any opportunity to like mess up, even though I obviously did. I was like drunk when I was 13 walking around, which did happen. I did get caught by the police one time. But
so you're going through high school and you found what you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
So when it sounds like you started drinking addictively right away. When did you kind of start to realize you had a problem? When did consequences start piling up?
Not until way later,
Okay.
honestly.
Was there anything that happened between there?
Yeah, I mean, like, when I was in high school, I was hanging out with a group of people, which are probably honestly the reason that Coraceed and Cough and Cold is now sold behind a counter, because we would just skip school and go steal a bunch of that, or steal a bunch of Robitussin, or buy like starter fluid and make it into ether and like huff that in a field. My consequences since I skipped school so much were basically that I got in trouble for skipping school. But I was really good at just like going home, saying, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry, and having them ground me for a few weeks, and it didn't really matter because I just sneak out at night.
Yep.
I'd just have some boy come pick me up, or by the time I got my driver's license, I would take my car. And it's crazy looking back on it, how good I got at sneaking out of the house and staying up until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then waking up at 6 to go to high school. I would have like...
Can you imagine trying to do that right now?
Oh my God, it's so brutal. That's what, sometimes when I have to stay up really late and get up early, I remind myself of that. Like, you used to run on 2 hours of sleep all the time. But it wasn't just, drinking. It was doing like Coracetin or Dramamine or acid, or doing coke, or really anything that people gave me, I would have done.
Anything you could get your hands on.
Anything that I could get my hands on, I would have done. And I did. I did all of it.
I think that's the finger fingerprint of being a full-on addict in high school, because you're
Yeah.
not old enough to get alcohol. You don't really know, like, you haven't made a ton of connections, and you'll just take whatever you can get your hands on that'll make you feel differently.
Yeah.
I remember taking half a bottle of Mucinex just to see what happened.
Yeah.
Just shit like that.
And if it had like dextromethorphan in it, you probably
Fantastic.
tripped out
Yeah.
super hard. Yeah, that's
I think I just passed out. But yeah, stuff like that.
Akin
totally.
to drinking children's ibuprofen, just
Exactly.
kind of ridiculous when you look back on it. But it's like, I didn't feel like that was super depraved. I feel like all my depravity came later, but now like talking about it, like, Jesus Christ.
Yep.
But yeah, all of that was going on, and I still was a good student.
God, I don't get how people do that.
I like,
Because I was not.
and I think that's honestly why I kind of felt that I was okay, because I was really book smart and I wasn't failing and I didn't get kicked out of classes and I wasn't getting in fistfights with my mom. Like, I was hanging out with this group of kids that did all of that, you know, the fighting and the drinking and having awful grades and having the turmoil at home. But I was kind of still this outlier that, like, I still had good grades and I could manipulate the principals. And, like, you know, like, I would go get drunk at lunch and I'd come home, or I'd go back to school, and my vice principal would be walking around, and they knew me. Like, they knew who I was by all means, but they'd, like, call me into his office, and I'd be fucking plastered. And they would just be like, "What were you doing?" And I'd just instantly start sobbing and be like, "I was thinking about killing myself," and blah, 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 blah. And the principal would just be like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with this." And he'd send me down to the counselor's office, and I'd sit there, and my parents would come, and they'd just be like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "Nothing."
Backtrack.
Like, he blew it out of proportion, but, like, there you go. I just got out of skipping school and getting wasted. And the fact that they didn't smell alcohol on me still, like,
Blows your mind.
it blows my mind, yeah. Yeah, I had those sort of evasive tactics because I didn't like confrontation at all.
Well, and doing anything you can to continue to do it.
Yeah, that too. I graduated high school a semester early because at that point in time, by the time I hit senior year, all of my friends had gotten kicked out. I was the only one left, and I wasn't going to get kicked. Well, I could have. My first week of senior class, my vice principal called me in and told me if I skipped class one time, he was going to pull me out of night school, and I wasn't going to be able to graduate early. So I did figure out a way out of that. My last class of the day was PE, and my teacher was pregnant, so she had to go to doctor's appointments all the time, and anytime she had a doctor's appointment, I'd check in, they'd do like the head count, and I would bail. I mean, I found ways to manipulate all of those situations, but I went to night school. I did it. Like, I did my senior project. I graduated a semester early.
Nice.
I was super fucked up the entire time.
Yep. So what followed? Sorry, you can take a drink if you need to.
Thank you.
So yeah, because I know you said you wanted to talk about, there was a lot of stuff that happened after you got clean.
Yes.
So what's kind of like the climax of the addiction? Like, what was the rock bottom?
So after I graduated high school, I started dating this boy who later on I ended up marrying. We moved out on our own. Like, I wanted to get out of my parents' house like as soon as I turned 18. That relationship with my parents never got any better, and I hated my mom, and I hated my parents, and I hated everything about living at home. So as soon as I could, I moved out, and we rented a house, and it was just keggers and beer, just drinking like incessantly.
Yep.
You know, we had 5 people, 7 people living in a teeny tiny house, and it would get to the point where we'd be there for a few months, and the police would get called a few times, so we'd move, and then the police would get called a few times, and we'd move, and we bounced around so much, but we just threw wild parties. And I was going to college and I was working, and I really didn't think that it was too much of a problem. But then when I started drinking, my stomach started to hurt really bad. And this was by the time I was like 19.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, at that point in time, my parents definitely could have shipped me off to rehab, and the insurance would have paid for it, no problem. But my stomach started to hurt really bad from drinking, and that's kind of when a red flag was like, this could be a problem. I am drinking a lot, but in my mind, I was like, only old people are alcoholics.
Yeah, the white hairs, red, burst blood vessels in their face.
Like, in my mind, I'm like, this is science. Yeah. You can't be an alcoholic. You cannot have that sort of problem when you're my age. But I was like, this could be a problem. At the same time, my roommates were starting to bring in a lot of pain pills. And I mean, pain pills were all right. Like, always my go-to was alcohol.
Yep.
But pain pills were all right. And then they started bringing in heroin. And I remember going down into my room, and there was a bunch of people in my room, including my boyfriend, and they were smoking heroin. And they were just like, do you want to smoke heroin? And like, pause. Because in my life, I told myself I was never going to do two drugs, meth and heroin. I was never going to do it. Even though I wanted to, because in my mind, doing those drugs was the ultimate self-destructive move, and that's what my life was really about, was self-destructing in, little tiny bits at a time. Yeah. Let's see how I can destroy myself today. So they said, do you want to do heroin? And I said, no. Immediately, no. Yes. And just like that. So then I walked into my room and I sat down and I smoked heroin with them, and it didn't do anything. Like, I didn't think it was that cool. I made all the boys puke. We had this like little teeny tiny bathroom, and they just like be all lined up around it.
You're good.
Puking like one after another. It was kind of majestic, but it never made me sick. But we had it, and I would smoke it, and I remember smoking a bunch of it and then feeling really sick when we stopped, and I was like, oh, this is what heroin withdrawal is. This is what it was. And it really just felt like I had a bad case of the flu. Yeah. I drank a bunch of Gatorade. I got some chicken soup. I got through it.
Curled up in a blanket.
Yeah. I went to class still. I was just like, well, that wasn't any fun. But I'm never going to let that happen again. Yep. Never going to let that happen again. So my people, the roommates who were getting it, were going to Portland to get it. And they were driving to Portland to get it because it's so much cheaper, and they were bringing it back. So we decided, boyfriend was like, we can make a bunch of money doing this if we just go to Portland and bring some back. So we would take my car to Portland, and we'd walk around downtown Portland until we find some people who had some, and we'd bring it back. And we would do this, and we had like $100, and we'd go get $100, sell it for $400 here. And we just did that over and over and over again, increasing the amounts that we would get. At some point in Portland, we would just always go to random people because everybody would get arrested, and junkies are so reliable. But we eventually ended up meeting this homeless man who had a really good connection, and we kind of formed a bond with him. Like, he was like a super chill homeless dude. He was like, we'd send him money. Like, if he wasn't like, he'd call us and he'd be like, hey kids, I need a place to stay. It's cold. And we had this sort of business relationship going on, and I felt so cool. I was like, I sell heroin, no big deal. Like, I'm doing these drug runs, and like, I had never been in trouble with the law. Yeah. Like, because again, evasive, non-confrontational. Like, all my other friends had been arrested or were in juvenile, detention, that sort of thing. Not me. I prided myself about that I had never been in any sort of legal trouble. Yep. And so this went on for like 6 months. At the same time, the use started to increase more and more and more. And I remember being like, okay, I'm physically addicted to it, but I'm never going to be mentally addicted to it because apparently I had a say in that. And we had this really brutal routine of where we would get a bunch of heroin, we go back, sell it, use it, run out, and then be like, we're never going to do heroin again. Go through cold turkey withdrawal. On day 5, we'd be like, let's go back to Portland. And we did this. Like, I have cold turkey detox from heroin. Like, I'm not even shitting you, 30 times. Gosh. Because we were idiots. Yeah. We just didn't know how to taper properly. But
That's so brutal.
So brutal, just so...
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah. But eventually it all caught up to us.
Of course.
And we got pulled over. We had nothing in the car, but they still arrested a bunch of us for like little things. I had a knife in my purse. They arrested me for having a knife in my purse. And they took us back to not the jail, but to an interrogation building. I could have sworn that they were taking me out to the desert to shoot me because we drove past the jail. That was my eccentric mind. But we went to this interrogation building, and I remember being like, oh, shit. They put us all in these little rooms and they interrogated us, and I didn't say anything. I was nervous and shaking, and they knew. They so knew, but they didn't have anything. I didn't have anything on me. So they let me go after like being in this room for 2 hours with narcotic detectives. It was terrifying.
Yeah. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, and that was the first time I'd ever had like any interaction with the police other than like a speeding ticket.
Yeah, that's fucking terrifying.
Dude, it was terrifying. I was just like, I don't know. The narcotic detective looked at me and he goes like, I've buried the bodies. Like, we've buried the bodies, and like we know what you're doing. So after that, we thought that the next course of action would be to move to California to just try and escape it all. And we did. We like packed up and left in like a week.
Wow.
We got the fuck out of there. And we moved to California, and I was like, this is great. We like tapered ourselves. We had learned by then how to taper ourselves. We got there. We worked on a pot farm because a lot of people would go down there and just work on pot farms. I'm like, this is a good career choice.
Yeah.
And turns out drugs are a lot cheaper in California. They're a lot cheaper. They're a lot better. So the cycle just progressed.
Yep.
It progressed and it progressed and it progressed, and it got worse. And like, I'm so happy I did not die or like get kidnapped in California. So happy that didn't happen. I put myself into some bad situations.
Yeah.
Bad situations. And it's because also we were just super naive kids from Idaho,
Yeah.
like trying to pick up drugs in San Francisco. You look like a fish out of water.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was not good. We didn't live in San Francisco. We lived 2 hours north of there, and finally we figured out where to get better drugs other than San Francisco, but it just progressed, and it got worse, and it got worse, and I was still living with the same guy, and there was like 1 week where we stopped using, and like that, I got pregnant. And I was working on this pot farm in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, we would walk the 8 miles down to get to our car to drive up to Eureka to get heroin. And that's like basically all we did. We like didn't really eat.
Yeah.
We didn't do too much. But yes, still using, definitely not as much because it was harder to get. But yeah, at that point in time, I got pregnant, and I was like, this is going to solve all my problems. Having a baby is going to solve all of my problems. I'm not going to be a drug addict anymore. It's going to be great.
Yep.
Because people don't do drugs when they have babies. So I ended up going back to Idaho and living with my parents. I told them I was pregnant. They're like, you can't work on a pot farm anymore. So came back to Idaho. My boyfriend stayed there and finished out working the season, and when he came back in November, I was probably about 7 months pregnant at the time. He had a ton of money from working. And he started using again, like using in front of me, and it was really fucking conflicting because here I went, I'm like pregnant out to here, and he's using my drugs without me. How dare him? How dare he do that? So I did what any good drug addict would do, and I relapsed when I was 8 months pregnant. Like,
The one thing you never say you never do.
yeah, yep. I would Google it. I would be like, is it okay to take pain pills while you're pregnant? And I tried to find all this justification for it. And at the end of the day, I wasn't shooting them. I told myself that I'll just smoke them. It'll be okay. I'm not shooting them. But it was pretty bad because like I got to the point where I was like, I'm only going to do it once. I'm only going to do it 2 times. I'm only going to,
Do it 30 times.
I'm only going to do it 30 times. People eventually would be like, they'd sell to us and then they'd be like, dude, your girlfriend is pregnant. Like, that was like another level down. Like I had just managed to sink myself another level down, and it became like, well, she can't go into withdrawal because she's pregnant. And we never ever told the doctor, and like, thank God my daughter is fine.
Yeah.
But like, we went to the hospital the night that I was set to deliver, and my boyfriend missed my baby coming out of me because he was buying pills in the parking lot. And when we went back into the room with the baby, the first thing I did was go in there and slam some Dilaudid into my arm. Like, here, take the baby. Like, at that point, I was like, this is problematic.
Yeah.
This is problematic.
Yeah.
But
that's your rock bottom.
No.
No. Sounds about right. All right.
No, it gets worse. We had all this money.
Yep.
Like, we still had thousands of dollars, and we were living with my parents. We weren't paying any rent. We weren't working. We weren't doing anything, just raising this baby and shooting a lot of heroin.
Yeah.
And it, like, we tried different things. We tried, like, Suboxone tapers. We tried going to the methadone clinic. We tried going off into the woods to, like, you know, get in touch with nature and stop using. Nothing ever worked. Like, I went to the methadone clinic for 4 months. I'm pretty sure I was using the entire time. I, like, tapered myself off 2 milligrams a day over the course of a month because I hated it. Finally got done with it, was like, yes, I've done it. I'm no longer a drug addict. The next day I got in a car accident and they gave me a bottle of Norco that I ate in a day. And then I got the insurance check and my car still drove. So, like, what else would you do with the $3,000 check other than spend it on a lot of drugs? And it just continued and it continued. And then we started using meth, and that's really when everything went downhill because, like, I had a degree of sanity while I was using heroin. You start using meth with it, and I was gone. Like, I lost so much weight. Like, I didn't have a period anymore. Like, it was nasty. And we were still living with my parents, and my parents were like, why aren't you doing anything with your life? What's going on? Like, they kind of knew what was going on, but, like,
not to the extent.
Not to the extent, you know? And me and him, like, we ended up getting married. That was another thing that happened. He, like, proposed to me, and I was like, okay, this is what's going to be. Yep. This is what's going to stop our drug use.
Things that'll fix it.
All the things that are going to fix it. Like, we had gone through the methadone program, and as far as my parents knew, we had stopped using after that. And so when we got married, it was like 90 degrees outside, but we were both wearing leather jackets, and everybody was like, how cute! But in reality, it's because we had track marks all over our arms that we didn't want them to see. It just continued to spiral and spiral. Eventually, my parents kicked me out of their house. We ended up living with his parents, who were a hell of a lot easier to manipulate and a hell of a lot easier to steal from. We stole from them so much. We were like desperate junkies at that point in time, like driving around on like $2 worth of gas, looking for like a lawnmower that somebody had left in their front yard to like shove into the back of the car to take to the pawn shop and be like, please, dude, we just need like $5 more. And then like going to the dealer and being like, we only have $35, please, can you kick us down a point that we can split? And it wouldn't even make us feel better. And then my husband OD'd. I woke up one morning and he was face down on the floor, and I was like, shit. And so rolled him over. His eyes were in the back of his head. We were living with his parents at the time, so I ran out and I told his dad to call 911. And I came back in and I started giving him CPR. Like, I'd read somewhere that that's what you do when somebody overdoses. And so my mouth wouldn't fit over his mouth, so I just gave him the chest compressions, but like the longest probably minute or 2 minutes of my life was giving that man CPR. But he came to, the paramedics came, they checked him out, and then I took my shot, went into the bathroom and locked the door, because if I died, I did not want them to fucking find me.
Yeah.
That's when I hit bottom.
Yep.
Yeah. And my drug use still continued after that. Like, after he OD'd, I went home and I told my parents what had happened. And they were pissed, but they knew. Yeah. And they're like, you gotta do something. Like, we're helping you now. This is out of control. You're not doing this to yourself. You're not doing this to your daughter. And they had called this place called Ashwood, and I went in for my initial assessment, and I sat down with Ben, and it was just like, I can't do inpatient because I have a kid. and I can't do day treatment because I have a kid. He's like, okay, you can do IOP. And so I started IOP having no clue what the fuck I was supposed to do, because like at the methadone clinic, they didn't give you any counseling. I'd never done anything like that before. And I would go to group and I'd feel somewhat motivated to do it, and my brain was still all haywire, but then I'd go back to my husband, and he was still using. And so it was like this vicious cycle of me getting like a few days and then relapsing, and getting a few days and then relapsing, and getting a few days and then relapsing. And whenever I was high, I couldn't pee. So I manipulated the poor front desk girls so much that I got to do unsupervised UAs. That was back when they had all the UAs supervised. And they wouldn't watch me anymore because I'd be in there for like half an hour. And it was because I was high and because I couldn't pee. And I'd just sit there with them and just be like, at least I'm not in group right now. But yeah, they wouldn't. They finally were just like, go pee. Like, go pee by yourself. So then I got to sneak in pee. But it all caught up to me. Like, I was involved in this house raid. And by the time they had like arrested everybody and got to me, I was just like, you guys, like, check it. This is what's in my car. You can go look. Yes, it's all mine. Like,
you're finally tired.
I was so like, it was so bad. Like, it was such a chore at that point in time. And I was like, I could see both sides of like, there's this group of like recovered people who are trying to get their lives together. And then there was me with my husband. He wouldn't let me go to inpatient treatment. And it sounds silly to like say it now, but he would not let me go. And so I didn't go until finally I got up the courage to be like, no, fuck you, I'm going. And that was like, that started the dissolution of our relationship. How much time do I have?
We're running up against it.
Okay, so I will start to hurry so I can spend the rest of my time talking about other cool stuff.
10, 15 minutes.
Dang it. I ended up going to rehab, and the facility that I went to was in Yakima, Washington, and it wasn't the greatest place, but it got me away from my husband enough.
And from heroin.
Yes. I mean, I snuck Suboxone in there because, come on.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? They didn't have any sort of detox. But I mean, like, it got me away from all of the destructive people.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, like, I was 23, and I was just, like, ready to make a change. I was so tired of it. I was so tired of, like, being in, like, a tiny trailer with a bunch of people who were maybe, like, 10 years older than me. They looked like they were 30 years older than me, doing the same thing day in and day out. And that's like a light bulb went on. And when I started thinking about my future, my entire life, I'd never thought about my future ever. When I was like in high school, my future was like, I'm probably going to die when I'm 19.
Yeah.
Because
that's the cards that got dealt.
By the time I got 19, I was like, I'm just going to die when I'm 25. I don't know how I'm going to die when I'm 25, but I'm just going to drop dead in some freak accident, and that's going to be the end. Like, I didn't think about my future whatsoever. Yep. And it was like absolutely like life-changing when I was like, I want a future and I want to live. And I don't want to be that motherfucker sitting on his mom's sofa in her basement shooting dope in another year, and another 5 years until I die. Yep. Because this will kill me. So I went to treatment. It was like the most like relieving thing to walk into like the auditorium that they had and sit down, and that feeling of surrender that they talk about. Mm-hmm. Holy shit. Yeah. Like, good stuff right there. But what really saved me was getting out of that program and going back to Ashwood. Like, I went to Ashwood from February of 2014 until September of 2015, like a year and a half. Yeah. Okay. I went to treatment in April of 2014 for the month of April. Okay. So I get out.
To inpatient treatment. Okay.
I get out, I have my baby, I'm living with my parents, I'm not allowed to live with my husband anymore, I really don't want to. While I'm gone, he decides he gets a wild hair up his ass and gets BPA funding and goes to treatment himself. And comes back out and immediately starts using. We get out and I'm hanging out with him, and it's just like, ugh. But within a month of me getting out of inpatient treatment, I got to process the fact that my husband was still using, my husband was sleeping with his drug dealer, and I found out I was pregnant again. Like a month after getting out of inpatient treatment.
Damn,
and it was...
You stayed clean through that.
No, I didn't stay clean through that. I didn't stay clean through that. That's why my clean date is July 28th.
That makes sense.
I didn't stay clean through it. I went to group. I shared with the group that I was pregnant. I shared all my fears, all my, like at that point in time, I had learned enough about like communicating that like, it's like, holy shit, this is a lot.
Yep.
I was going to meetings, and I went to one meeting, and I had a really bad craving, and I called my husband, and I said, I want to use. And just like that, like it didn't matter. Nothing mattered at that point. And so I went on like a 4-day bender, and at the end of it all, I realized that I was like on this precipice of like, you can either throw your life away, throw your daughter's life away, throw the baby I was pregnant with, that life away, just all of it. Like, you might as well just go move to Seattle and fucking suck dick for dope, because your life is never going to get any better than this. Yep. And so I called my counselor at Ashwood, and I told him what happened. And then I went to group, and I told my group what happened. And then I went home to my parents, and I told my parents what happened. And this was massive for me, because I had never once admitted to doing anything like that.
You finally got honest.
I finally got honest.
Everybody.
Like, I would go to group before, like, I'd have like a loaded syringe in my boot in group, and people would be calling me out and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I finally got honest. And that was my clean date, July 28th of 2014. And it was really, really hard, because my husband was still out using. He actually got sentenced to Ada County Drug Court, and he wasn't doing it. Like, he was out, he was being crazy, he was smoking meth, he was using heroin, just like, it was so heartbreaking for me, and the emotions that I was experiencing, not just because I was an early person in recovery, but also because I was pregnant.
And somebody you cared about.
Somebody that I cared about, but like at that point in time, like I recognized that two codependent people are like two people stitched up together, and you let it heal, and you turn into this nasty, gross humanoid form of two bodies being sewn together, and I had to like go through and scalpel it. This is how I like picture it. Scalpel him off of me, and let those wounds go back together and heal.
Yep. And
so it was painful for so many reasons, but like, I had a core group of people. I'd go to meetings and sob all the time. Yep. Like, and people were just used to it. I'm sure people were like, what's wrong with this woman? But like, he eventually went to jail. I actually gave birth to second baby while he was in jail. It was funny. He wasn't there for the birth of either of his children. But like, he got out of jail, and he ended up doing good, and he actually ended up doing the drug court program. Like, and we kind of each did our own programs, and we went through the steps of it all. And like, he, for a while he was living at the Mission, and then we had our own home, and we started to like build a little life together. Like, things were going good. I was working, he was working, and then he graduated drug court. And what do good drug addicts do after they graduate drug court? They go smoke blunts. And like, it devastated me, because like at that point in time, I recognized that I had changed as a person, and he hadn't.
Yeah.
Like,
and you had to like accept it.
I had to like accept that. And so we lived in like pre-divorce turmoil for a long time. Yeah. Like, I dreamt about getting away. And eventually I found out that he was using meth. Like, the behavior started to become super erratic and super all over the place, but I was like, just, I guess, in denial. Like, and so when people call in and they say, I didn't know, it's like, of course you didn't know. We don't ever want to think that about the people that we love. Like, the same with my parents looking at me. Like, you don't want to think about that. So he told me that he was using meth, and there was like a 10-day period before I was like, I can't do this, and I left. Like, I picked up my kids, I went to my parents' house, I left everything there, and I told my parents what happened, and they let me live with him, and it started the process of this super, super brutal divorce. One, because he was twacked out of his mind, and like, he was not all about divorce. I was about divorce. He was not all about it. So it turned into this weird cycle of like him wanting to see the kids, and then I'd let him see the kids, and he wouldn't have any food or like toilet paper or anything at the house. So then I'd have to go get the kids, and eventually I just wouldn't let the kids see him at all because he was so mentally unstable. And then he like started stalking me. He'd show up at work. He actually, there's a restraining order against the office, but from the office against him. He's not allowed to be there. Wow. He would show up at my house at like 2 a.m. He would call me over and over again. And it was hard to really try and separate this is addict behavior towards like, this is abusive behavior. Yeah. And I had to get a restraining order against him. I had to get basically a protection order and then a no contact order. Like, I had to go through the court process of all of this while at the same time.
And you're what, 2 years? How long are you at this point?
I was probably about 3 years clean at that point.
Okay.
Like, I was working here at Northpoint, but I still had a good recovery system in place. Like, I had
a program, working
a
staff
lot
sponsor,
to like support me, and I definitely had to lean on that support. But it's like, it was fucking craziness. Like, I've never dealt with somebody like that before, and at the same time, it's like, you get taught all these things about what to tell people when you're an addict and you're coming home. Like, this is why I did this. When the tables are flipped and it's somebody that you care about, like, all that shit goes out the window. It's like, why the fuck are you doing this to me? Like, don't you love me enough to not do meth? Like, come on.
Yeah.
It was super duper hard. It was super duper hard. It was like the hardest thing that I've ever been through. Just like the constant text, the constant harassment that like I could the text messages I have are absolutely like, you know, I'm gonna come find you and skull fuck your eyeballs out, like that sort of shit. Yeah. And the entire time, like, I stayed clean. Like, he's not paying me any child support. I'm doing this all on my own.
Good for you.
It was insane.
Yeah. That's a lot to go through.
It's a lot.
3 years is still pretty early recovery.
Yeah. And there were definitely times where, like, it became too much and I wanted to use.
Oh, sure.
And I would just like lay on the floor or call my sponsor or do anything other than use. Like,
which is that all you have to do.
Right. Basically, that's all you have to do is not use. Like, you can be as insane as fuck, but you still don't use because it's all a wave. I've found it's all a wave, and it gets to like a high point and then it comes crashing down, and everything will get back to a sense of normalcy. It just takes time. And
so, to take us out of here.
Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. No, I don't want to, like, that was all amazing.
I could talk for like 5 hours.
And I appreciate it, because that was all, I think that's all. A lot of people don't realize that recovery is shit sometimes. It is hard as fuck.
Yeah.
So what is life like now? And what do you want to say to somebody that might be going through something similar or struggling in early recovery?
My life is something that I never thought it would be. Like, the person who was scared when I was little, like, I'm not that person anymore. Recovery allowed me the opportunity to really discover myself. Like, I thought I was smart and I was book smart, but I had no idea who I was as a person. Yep. The recovery process allowed me to find that person and really like love the person that I've become, and become a strong person and become a confident person. Like, I'm basically the polar opposite of who I was before. And if you had told me that when I was 16, I probably would have like flipped you off and like spat on you or something.
I was going to say, flipped off is a little nice.
Yeah, I definitely would have spat on you too, because I was that type of person. My life is so much more better. Like, it's so much more better.
So more better.
Like, I realized early on in recovery that, like, life doesn't get easier, we just get stronger. That's really what it boils down to. My first year in recovery, I tell people it was hell. It was pure fucking hell. And that's just when I was pregnant. That's not even going through the whole, like, restraining order against my husband, like moving up, having him threaten to burn every single belonging I had. Like, he never did. But at that point in time, I'd come to terms with it. Like, my sobriety and my sanity was more important than all that shit.
Yep.
Like, I am, like, number one. Everybody else, and I don't say that in, like, a conceited way, but, like, the moment I let myself become, like, less than, everything else falls apart for me. Like, I have to take care of myself first and foremost if I want to be able to do anything in life successfully. So for people who are struggling, my God, reach out for help. Like, do not do it on your own. And then just listen. Like, let people carry you. That's what the early recovery process is for, is allowing people to carry you.
I can't say it better myself.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here.
You're
your
welcome.
story, I had no idea what your story was, so I was actually really excited to hear it, and it did not disappoint, to say the
I
least.
should have written out some prompts. I feel like I got like that, but whatever. It was
Trust
good.
me, everybody is gonna enjoy
Another
it,
thing that a counselor told me is that I am a perfectionist, and I'm like, I'm not perfect. And he's like, no, but you want to be perfect, and because your life isn't perfect, it causes you pain. And I said, fuck you.
Which is the appropriate response.
True, but it's still like
ass.
anytime I'm like, oh, it's not perfect. Oh, just let it go. Thank
Well,
you,
you
Cooper.
did as perfectly as you could have, and I love it. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button, that comment button, that subscribe button. Tell one person that you think would get value out of Sean's story. Thanks again for being here. This has been No Way But North, where we talk about the miracles of recovery and the tools used to achieve them. Thanks. If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, call 1-877-648-3125. The views and opinions expressed in No Way But North do not reflect those of Northpoint Recovery or any other institution or organization.